Uh, eh, Brr, brr. Hey, Davey. The other mic's still connected though, right? Just cause the okay, no, cause the spring on this dude's actually like super loose, so it doesn't actually hook on anything. Yeah, it's like really loose. So,
Do you want to use the other one?
yeah, well, yeah, I just can't. There's nothing I can clip on.
It worked for me. Something like that.
I'm just gonna be.
Use the
I'm
other
just
one
gonna
if you
be
want.
rubbing against it
Yeah,
with
no
my neck though
problem.
the
Yeah,
entire day.
yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
So next job is a clip.
Hello.
Um,
Pop up. anything. I've been muted this whole time. Super ready to just fight anything. Just lats, delts, all kind of primed. It's gonna be a beast, and we're gonna go through the parts of this like midterm project. That might be a little sticky for you. Things that might be a little tough. Places where you might want to pay some extra attention, and places where you might not want to pay any attention at all, right? It's gonna be great. So this lecture, again, gonna be regular kind of length. We'll take a break about halfway through. Just gonna crush through these slides. So today is a big day. It's a big day. This will be your first group web app, right? Be your first web app made as a group. So there's going to be things that you don't know yet. You have not had to deal with like group dynamics on a web dev project before, right? This is going to be an exciting way to like explore that, right? So have any of your teams yet started to code? Has anyone started to like write a single line of code yet? No? Did you? Diana, did you code? Did you write any code? Did you write a console log statement? No, okay. So there better be no code. Zero code written so far, right? However, have you maybe started looking at which projects are interesting to you, right? And started kind of formulating some ideas, and you're ready to brainstorm together. That's good, right? The projects that you're looking at, right, are they interesting to you for particular reasons? Are there problems that you've been thinking about tackling like previously, and that's why you're looking at those? Or are you just kind of like random number out of 7 picking a project? First one. Okay, good. Because I do want to ensure that you are picking these projects for good reasons, right? We're gonna look at the stuff that you can do with your projects or whatever, but like I want you to think back to the reasons for why you took boot camp in the first place, right? And explore how the setup kind of scaffolded out ideas for our projects that we have set up for you, right, might align with the goals that you have, right? So keep that in mind. Now, we're going to be looking at the recipe for success in working through really any of these projects. I'm not going to focus on a particular project. I'm going to be talking about tools in general and like structures in general. Step 1, pick a project, right? Do this as a group. Argue about what things are interesting to you. Pick something that like actually excites you. So you still have time, right? Your groups only got put together yesterday. Take some time today, right, to really, really think over what you want to spend your next 5 days working on. Here's a heads up. The card game, not very easy. Not very easy, but very rewarding, right? It's a good challenge to bite off, like, nah. But don't be surprised if it bites back. Maybe take some time to, yeah, maybe take some time to talk to the other cohort, right? Like when they get let go for a break, set out some traps, throw some like spiky things on the ground so they like slow down or whatever. Trap one of them and go, hey you, how did you find this particular project? You saw them do the projects like when you started. You wish you could see it now, right? Yeah, like tackle them and be like, hey, I can't remember how your project went, right? But please give me all the info you have, right? I need to know what it was like working on this thing. Okay, now, once you've picked a project, the first question is, where the actual heck do we start with actually building this stuff up? And that's where we need to talk about data, right? When I say the word data, my voice gets growly. I go, data, tasty data, right? It's hard for me to say data without feeling a little bit of greed crawl up my spine, right? Data. I met a dude who told me data is the new oil. Nice oil. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to get off this bus. No. So data is first. Data is everything. Data is all. Everything in web development, right? Every product starts off with data. Your data is the product, right? The data is the product. Really, let's hammer this in. Facebook. Facebook is a neat enough product. They've got, I don't know, 25 users. They've got some number of users on Facebook. Facebook is cool because it lets you interact with your friends, right? It lets me see the news pop up and propaganda, all that stuff. It's great. Facebook is great and it's really good. It's really good for the people who make money off of Facebook, meaning like advertisers, right? Advertisers make tons of money off of Facebook because you don't pay for it. You just use it. We are the product, right? Our interactions with Facebook, that's what creates the product, right? So an advertiser gets to benefit off of the fact that Facebook has gathered so much data about us to help advertisers really target ads really, really well, right? That's the product on Facebook. Right? So if tomorrow some intern goes to the Facebook GitHub and goes, git rm star, delete this repository, and they see the thing that's like, this is a dangerous operation, and they just go like enter, delete, and they delete all of the front end code for Facebook. Maybe they even delete all of the back end code for Facebook, all the routing, all that stuff, right? All the EJS views or whatever that Facebook's built on. They delete all of that stuff. Right? Facebook's fine. They've still got their database of all that stuff, right? We talked about databases the past like 4 days, really. They've still got all their data. That's fine. They're just gonna hire a bunch of more interns or whatever, right? And go, yeah, work on this thing. And they work on the thing. 3 days. They put up a rudimentary front end, and it's good. Everything's good. Facebook just kind of trucks on, and they can keep selling their advertisement services. But if their front end and their back end, it's all good. Like, let's just assume, again, in a hypothetical situation, Facebook is running smoothly, and somebody goes to the database and they go, or say there was a SQL injection. Somebody signs up with the name drop table users, drop table Facebook tracking data, and that stuff drops. Right? You'd see the Zuckmeister on TV just crying, just be like, I worked so hard for like 7 years. You know how many friends I lost to get to 1 billion or whatever it would suck for them because the data is the thing that makes the app worthwhile. Right? That's what really makes the thing kind of tick. So, long story short, the data is the product. Right? We need to figure out what data is our product about. Granted, you won't be able to, like have your product run for like 8 years and gather data on people, right? But you still have access to data on the internet, right? You still have access to data that other people have collected, and you still have access to data that you can just make up. That's fine. Okay? But thinking about the data that makes up your application, that'll inform the way, right? It'll inform the way that you design your application, both from a visual point of view, but also from a features point of view. Right? So everything starts with data. First question is, what is the data that you can access or acquire, right? Let me move back here. These are some of the projects, right? Let me look at food pick-up ordering, right? What is the data that we can access or acquire? Maybe we can access or acquire the... I'm going to go off a little bit on the, like, whatever, but maybe there's information about nutritional information for food, right? So when people are ordering food, they can order food by nutritional info, right? Maybe we're looking at, the resource wall or the smart to-do list. Like maybe these things are going to connect to the Google APIs, right? To pull interesting info about maps or little summaries of the things that I put up on the walls and all that, right? That's what I mean by data. Maybe the card game, maybe you decide to put in an AI mode, right? And maybe as part of that AI mode, you need to access like a database of best
poker moves or whatever, right? Depending on what you choose to do with the card game, right? That's the kind of data that will make your application tick, right? And then the next question is, can you correlate that data to something else that's interesting, right? So let's say, for example, say that I'm thinking about the food ordering app, right? Can I take the fact that mangoes have a really high whatever content, and so does this other fruit or whatever, right? All this data that's pretty useful. Can I sort all of the things that I'm going to be selling on my food order pickup? Right? Can I sort them by nutritional value? Right? In that way, like, can I pivot by using the data to get something else, such as the most nutritious fruits, if this is like a smoothie website or something. Right? And then continuing on that idea, these two things are kind of related. How can we present that data to add value to the user? Right? How can the user see, right, that these aren't just random data points, but they're data points that are valuable to the user in order to like make a decision or improve their life or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, these three questions are going to start guiding the way that you'll be thinking about your project. Right? As you think and brainstorm over what your project should be able to do, over what your data is and how you're presenting particular things to users, right? I really want you to start, first of all, writing all of this stuff down. Right? That's a big theme of planning for these projects, is everything needs to be documented, right? It needs to be documented because you're going to get super hyped. You're going to get excited, and you're going to forget things, right? So we need to make sure that everything's written down so you can come back to it later when you're less kind of like just jittery, right? So it's all still there. And the other reason is because as you list out all these things that maybe your application should be able to do, I want you to start thinking about the difference between features versus benefits, right? I want you to start thinking about the things that you're listing out, how many of those things are actually necessary to make your application work, right? How many of the things that you're listing out are actually necessary for you to reach the goal, right, that you intend to reach, right? And how many other things are really just fluff, right? When we're talking about features versus benefits, right, I'm talking about the fact that users do not pay for these things that I'm going to call features. Features are going to be like fancy drop-down menus. Features are going to be when you hover over this thing, it like glows a little bit, right? That's exactly, like that's a feature. Users, I don't go to Facebook, right, because the icons are cute, right? I go to Facebook because I can see my friends and I can talk to them. I actually don't go on Facebook anymore, but you know what I mean. Users pay for benefits. And when I talk about pay, I'm talking about paying with money, or I'm talking about paying with time, right? Users will use an application because they benefit from it somehow, right? So we need to really lock down what parts of the things that you're coming up with, right, actually improve a user's experience, whether it's their experience on the application or their experience really in life. How can we figure out if something benefits someone? Well, look at this handy dandy chart. Wow, this is Nima's universal values. Psych 101. I don't have a background in psych, but I'm going to pretend like I do. So users, people, all the time, they want 4 things, right? 4 things. This is like Wolf of Wall Street. You know, that whole like sell me this pen thing. Users want to look good, right? People want to look good. What does look good mean? Well, people might want to look good like physically. They might want to look pretty. Does your application make people look beautiful? Right? Case in point, Snapchat has got those like filters. Put that filter on, and they like mold your face a little bit. I don't know if you've actually seen that they like reshape your face a little bit. Like if you use like the bunny filter or whatever, it makes people look good. People use that stuff. That's a benefit, right? Other things might make people look good in like not necessarily a physical sense, but more like a socio-economic lifestyle sense, such as Instagram, right? People post on Instagram so they can make their friends jealous about the lives they live, right? That's what Instagram's for. Makes people look good. Does it make them feel good? Does the application make them feel good about themselves, right? Does the application make them feel good physically, right? Does the application make them feel like they're doing a good thing, right? Feeling good. That's something that people really want. What about saving time? Do you got time? I don't have time. I would like time to be saved, right? Self-explanatory, right? Does your application maybe help people make decisions really quickly, right? Is that what it's about? Like snappiness, right? And you can really hone in on the fact that, hey, my application will help you save time. And this is how, right? Such as maybe there's a bunch of people want to go watch a movie, right? Everybody puts in what movie they want to see, right? And then the application just kind of and picks one. Maybe it picks the one that's due to like a formula, the closest one with the highest score, right? Like the highest rating, right? So then everybody gets kind of like a good experience out of the thing, saving time. One of my favorite applications, not from Lighthouse, but something that my friends and I use, is we tend to play board games a lot, and we need to pick who goes first when we're playing a board game. And there's this app where you put your finger on it, and when enough people put on their fingers, you hold for a second, and then it picks one finger to be the first person to go, right? Easiest UI ever. You just hold your finger down, right? And it helps us save time. Last one here, saving money. Again, pretty self-explanatory. Does your app maybe show a bunch of places where you can buy the same thing and highlight the one that is cheapest, right? Does your app help people budget? Again, fairly self-explanatory, but when you're figuring out what your features are, right? When you're figuring out what your features are, try to make sure that they target at least one of these, right? Don't try to target all of these, right? No good application does a great job of hitting every single one of these, right? Just focus in on one, maybe two, but my recommendation is just focus in on one, right? And make everything kind of work around the fact of, oh, this makes people feel good. It makes them have fun, right? Oh, this makes people save time, right? And every single one of your features, right, which I'm going to rename benefits, every single one of your benefits is going to be targeted around that thing. Okay. Are there any questions so far? Sweet. Okay, so next slide here is about user stories. Man, you're going to have such a good time with user stories. Okay, so user stories. Let me just zoom in on something real quick. Where'd my mouse go? You're not ready to code. Not ready to code. This slide is going to pop up a couple times over the course of the slides. Do not start coding yet, right? We need to figure out what our users are actually going to do with the application. And so once you started like loosely brainstorming things that maybe your application could do at like a high level, right? And you have like really rough kind of bullet point notes of, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we had this and this other thing and this other thing? What I'm going to need you to do is start nailing down actual like cemented user stories. And a user story is generally this kind of sentence right here, right, which defines some behavior, right? Some behavior that your application can enact. As a blank, I want to blank because blank. This is a starting point for what a user might want to do with an application and why they might want to do that particular thing, right? To guide your decision in how you actually make that happen, right? You come up with user stories because later on as you're building your application, you can reflect on the user stories and see, hey, am I actually targeting the needs of the user that I came up with, right? So you need to come up with like a persona. You need to come up with a type of user, right? A type of user and think about how that user has a problem and might want to solve that problem so you can target it for that particular person, right? As a user, I want to blank because blank. Okay, so there's also just this other different variant on like how you might describe a user story. As a blank, as a new user or whatever, I should be able to add friends because I want to stay in touch with my friends on a friends list or something, right? Should be able to versus want to. Should be able to, this kind of wording is nice for when you want to word something to catch somewhere where there's a bug, maybe. So here, just notice here, as a user, I want to add friends to a list, because I want to keep track of the people I'm friends with, right? Versus this here, as a user, I should be able to add friends to a list because I want to keep track of them, right? That's a place where then I can just semantically encode the meaning of it should work. So if it doesn't work, that's a bug, right? And notice again, we're not actually writing code, right? We're writing out the motivations that a user might have for wanting to use a particular application, and then we can start writing user scenarios. Right? And a user scenario is going to describe a particular interaction that a user will have with the application. Right? So given blank, when blank happens, then blank thing should happen. Right? This is just a skeleton for what this might look like, but filled in, here's a combination of a traditional user story and a user scenario to kind of build out this idea of one of the things that your application should be able to do. Here's the title of the thing. For this particular application here, this hypothetical application, there's a website where people can post short stories, right? People can post short stories, and here I'm saying that a user should be able to save a short story, right? So user should be able to save story. That's the title of this thing. And then really diving into it, here's the user story. As a user, I want to save a story that I'm reading because I found it interesting or because I found it useful or nice. Here's the scenario that actually describes the interaction that the user has with the website. Given that I'm reading a story, when I tap the icon to save a story, then the story should be saved to my saved stories, right? So we've gone from like a high level kind of motivational idea to the nitty grittier kind of bits that describe how the application is working, right? And what this gives you is when you've built up enough of these, right, you have a good understanding of everything that your application should be able to do. And any code that you write should have to do with a user story that you came up with. Right? If you're writing some code that doesn't have to do with the user story that you came up with, right, then you're wasting your time. I really want to be clear on that. Every single line of code that you write should be tied back to a user story that you came up with, right? And as your application process, planning process, develops over time, right, you're going to be changing your user stories. You're going to come up with like 5 user stories at first, and then you start working and you come up with better ideas. You're going to have to go back and just change your user stories a bit. Right? The user stories should be your canonical resource for going back to figure out, okay, what the heck are we building right now? Right? That should be your resource for figuring out where you're going. Right? To me, the user stories are the most important part of a project. Right? The most important part. To me, a project could even end with the user stories. Right? Not here, but in real life. Right? Somebody could show up with like a bunch of user stories they put together, and I would go, wow, you put a lot of thought into this, right? We're going to pay somebody to go build it, right? But you've come up with a planning process. Right? There's so many developers out there. You can like outsource building apps. I mean, not today. Don't. KV looked at me. I'm like, no, don't actually outsource your midterms, right? But like the important part is the planning of it, right? Similar to what we were talking about data. Okay, and now without data, an application is useless. Right? Without user stories, a project is useless because you don't really have a direction that you're going towards. Right? So user stories and scenarios, I tend to call them user stories as an all-encompassing thing. Notice there's also maybe some additional info down here, such as like when I tap the icon, and here there's information about what an icon is. Oh, it's the bookmark icon, right? All this stuff over here. Okay, so this here has a little and inclusion. Let me zoom in on it. So it's the same user scenario plus story put together, but there is the word and added to it that says save it to my save stories and alter the icon to indicate success. Okay? What I'm trying to show here is that we can encode the stuff that should happen in the UX, right? The stuff that should happen in the user interface and the user experience. That stuff can be written out in these like user scenarios. Okay? It can be written there so that when you eventually go ahead and start writing the code to make that stuff happen, right? It has been documented ahead of time. Right? It has been documented ahead of time that this is something that's supposed to happen. Again, your user scenarios, your user stories and scenarios put together, I think is the most important part of the planning process, right? The most important part of the project, because when you start working in groups on a project, you need to figure out how you split up tasks. Okay? We're going to talk deeply about that in a while, right? But one of the ways that I like splitting up tasks is by assigning user scenarios to particular people. Hey, you do this entire flow, and you do this entire flow, and you do this entire flow, right? That's one way that you can split up group work, right? So again, I just want to take a second to talk about that. We are going to go deep into how to actually split up group work later in the press. Okay. So I know I used the words way back here, features versus benefits, right? This was purely kind of for a demonstrative purpose. I'm trying to tell you that some of the features are beneficial and some of the features are not. Right? I'm going to move ahead using the word features when I'm talking about benefits. Okay, just because feature is just a more regular word. Okay, we're trying to hit a point in our application where we are feature complete. And by feature complete, what we mean is we have all of those user stories kind of laid out. Right? All the user stories laid out. They all hit the fundamental requirements for what we want our application to be, right? And nothing extra, no fluff. It's just actually just hitting the mark. Right? And we have all of those features actually implemented, working properly. Right? That place is where we call feature complete. Right? When we hit that point, we say our application is feature complete. We've completed all of the required features. Now, there's a little bit of math that you might do. Let me move back a little bit. There are, what, like 3 people per team right now? 3? 3 or 2? Okay, so math-wise, I'm just going to say 3 people per team for the moment. Let's say you can hit, as a team, about 1.5 features a day. Right? 1.5 features per day. You have like 5 days. Right? So the math says that you should get about 7 or 8 features max. Right? 7 or 8 features max. There should be 7 or 8 things that your application can do. Right? Don't set the mark way too high. Right? Set it at 7 or 8 things your application can do, and it can do it really well. Right? And that's what we're getting to when we talk about an MVP, a minimum viable product. Your product does not need to be like the be-all, end-all, right? It doesn't need to hit every single mark in the world. It doesn't need to solve every problem. It just needs to solve the minimum viable set of features, right, to make your product useful, right? To make your product beneficial and to make people look at the product and go like, oh, aha, I get it. Right? That's what we're trying to get to. Right? I don't need you to go ahead and make your application work on every possible browser. Right? That's a waste of time. If you're testing out like, oh, but what does it look like on Safari? And you're like, oh, but the blue is kind of off. Like, I don't need that. Right? I need you to figure out the 7 or 8 features that make your application useful and feature complete, so that when somebody looks at it, they say, I understand why I would want to use this. Okay? Or I understand why they spent 5 days working on this. Okay? That's what we're trying to hit. So here's a quick story about a house. This house here is called the Winchester Mansion. Yeah, so the Winchester Mansion, pretty interesting. Okay, I'm going to remember the story off the top of my head. Basically, what happened is Winchester, like the pew pew gun guy. There's a movie about this house? Oh snap! I did not know that. I'm gonna open it up for myself later. So the Winchester mansion situation here. Dude dies and he leaves a bunch of money behind for his, I guess, widow, and she gets duped by a bunch of architects and whatever into building more and more and more onto this mansion that she wanted to build in like memory of him. Maybe I have the story a little wrong. The fact is, this is a house that was built by tons of different contractors and tons of different architects over the span of like 60 years or something, and they just kept adding more and more to the house. So there's like stairs that don't go anywhere, like stairs that just go up into the wall. There's, you know, the kind of thing where like you open up a door and there's just nothing there, or like windows that point to other walls, you know, stuff like that. Where obviously this thing was like planned by a committee, right? Like just a bunch of people with different ideas, kind of not really going anywhere. You got this super bizarre house, the Winchester Mansion. The reason that I bring this up is because on the surface level, right? Be like, oh snap, I love marble. Let's make marble stairs. And you're like, wait, what do I need stairs for? Right? Well, let's just make them. Wouldn't it be cool if we had marble stairs in like a spiral situation? They're like, yeah, no, but hold up, like we don't need stairs. And you're like, no, it's too late. Like I'm making the stairs. Right? Like that's the Winchester Mansion, and that is development. Right? That is development. When you're working on a team, even when you're working by yourself, right? You might sometimes just get so caught up by an idea, like, oh my god, did you guys hear about GraphQL? Let's put GraphQL in here, right? I need you to catch yourself anytime you say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, like, if somebody in your group starts off with, wouldn't it be cool? I need all of you to, like, hiss like cats at the person. Just, no, it wouldn't be cool, right? Wouldn't it be cool? No, absolutely not. Shame, right? Wouldn't it be cool is the death of software development projects, right? You need to really figure out whether something's actually part of becoming feature complete, right? So if you aren't going to use it, if you aren't going to demo it in front of people, do not build it. Can I be even more clear? Do not build things that you're not showing people, right? Because nobody's going to dive into your code. Nobody. No, like when you're demoing, you saw the demos. They did the demos for you. At no point was someone like, hey, whoa, can you switch to your code real quick? Like, I just want to see, how did the login route work? Was that a post or a get? What was, wait, how did you pass the template vars in? Like, that does not happen, right? If you're not going to show people a particular thing, do not build it. And that goes into things like frequently asked question pages, okay? If you're making a website about Nima's fruit delivery service, right? It might feel fun to make a frequently asked questions page like, yes, our fruit is all organic and all grown in Nima's bathtub, right? Like, just, I could do all that stuff, but no one's going to read it. Because what are you going to do during the demo? Pop up the frequently asked questions page and be like, hey, you guys want to look at that for a couple minutes? Okay? Also, your application will have been demoed for the first time. There's no such thing as frequently asked questions for an application nobody's asked questions about before. Okay? I'm pointing this out because there are people who spend time working on the FAQ or the about pages. Okay? Make that like super stretch, right? Super stretch. You can build that after bootcamp, right? After bootcamp, when you want to go present this thing to other people and whatever, that's cool. But as part of the demo, because we're working towards the demo for Monday, right? As part of the demo, leave that stuff out. Leave out sign up pages, okay? When you're demonstrating a project to people, right? Oh man, how fun is it to watch people like log into things, right? So much, or sign up for stuff. Oh, once I type the password, I need a special character, my bad. Like, I don't want to see that in the demonstration. So maybe it's straight up, don't make a sign up page, right? I'm getting like really heated right now. I can't believe, like, I've seen so many people make login and sign up pages and I want to scream. You have seen now that you can make seeds for your database, right? You used Connects yesterday. Right? If you need help with seeds still, like perfect, come ask me and I'll help you out. But you can make seeds. So you can seed things like, I'm going to go back to Nima's fruit cup delivery service. I can seed things like different kinds of fruit cups that should be in my database, right? With their inventory quantity and whatever. I can also seed users, right? I can seed in users that should already exist, right? So when I'm demoing, I don't need to go and sign up. And that takes me to hot take. Login pages. Don't make them, right? Don't. If I get an assistance request from one of y'all being like, I'm having trouble with bcrypt. I'm trying to hash this password and just compare the hashes. I'm gonna scream and pull out my hair. Right? I'm gonna like lie down on the ground and start throwing a tantrum because I know that you can do logins. I know that you can do signups. We've done that in TinyApp, so I don't want you to do it again. Right? It's a waste of time. We know you can do that stuff. Right? Spend your time working on things that are like new and interesting to you. Right? If login is not a core functionality of your application, then don't do it. You can have a button that logs somebody in automatically. Just have a button. When I log it in, it automatically logs me in as this user. Right? Just hard code that. Right? Maybe you need 2 people to be logging in. Just give it a text field that you write a name into. You don't do a password thing. Right? Like, don't spend your time on that stuff. Has this been clear? Cool. So one of your user stories should not be, as a user, I want to log in, or as a user, I want to sign up. That should not be part of it. Cool. Here's an example login route that you can make for yourself. Right? App get /login/ID. Right? Just an example route. Whenever somebody makes a GET request to this route for login/Nima, it puts the word Nima in the cookies. Right? You can do that. Right? And then if somebody else makes a GET request to /Jane, it'll put Jane in the cookies. Right? So there you go. This is totally fine. This is great. Do this for the midterm if you really need some login. Right? Heads up, don't do this in production. Like, never. Just automatically log people in. Oh, login/Bill Gates. My TD bank account just got a little heavier. So, feel free to do this. Steal this code. Okay. Now we're going to start talking about a thing called an ERD. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about this, and then we're going to take a break. So, an ERD, right? In this process, at this point of the process, you're still not ready to code. An ERD is an entity relationship diagram, right? It's going to be a formalized kind of way of making little doodles, right? Making little doodles that encode information about the nouns or the things that your application is made up of, right? And the relationships between the different things. So, for example, and I know this isn't super visible, so maybe like lean in. I have 3 tables over here, right? And they're going to correlate, roughly to database tables, right? Users, posts, and comments. So maybe I'm thinking about an application where users are able to make posts on stuff and other users can comment on posts, right? So I can start listing out all the things that a user should have. Like a user should have a username, an email, a password, created at time, and then updated at time, maybe if the user updates their username. And then a user can also make posts, so there should be posts. And a post might have a title and a body. And there's also comments. Comments might have like a subject that the comment's about, right? Along with some body explaining stuff inside of the comment. And then what's interesting is that these things here, they're all related to each other somehow, right? For example, a post is made by a user. So a post should have a foreign key, right? A post should have a foreign key that points to a user. So a user will have a primary key ID. And since a user can have many posts, every post will have a foreign key pointing to the user ID, right? And I've started encoding this information to like an actual diagram, right? Here's something else. Comments are about particular posts. So a comment will have a post ID, and a comment's made by a particular user, so it'll have a user ID. Right? This information, it's important to actually put it out in a diagram and not just dive into coding it up. Because I might decide to switch the kind of database that I'm using. Right? Or I might want to just hand this work off over to someone, and giving them a diagram to work from, right, is going to be beneficial in terms of them choosing how they're going to implement this particular thing. Right? Right now, all of these tables are going to correlate directly with database tables for you. Right? They're going to correlate there. But what I want you to do when you're building up these things is, first of all, think about every one of the tables as being nouns. Right? And in a second, I'm going to say that I also want you to think about the relationships that each one of these nouns can have and the things that the nouns can do to each other. Right? This entity relationship diagram process, right? This is not its own separate thing along this pipeline, like not connected to everything else that you're doing. This is part of that user story process, right? As you're putting together user stories and user scenarios, right? And then you move forward with the entity relationship diagrams, check to see if the ERDs are actually enacting the things that your user scenarios say you should be doing, right? It's really, really common for people to make these beautiful, just amazing user scenarios, and then also beautiful ERDs that have absolutely nothing to do with each other, right? I need you to like sit down and go, okay, are these things actually related? And over the process of your project, when you come up with new things, or you go and tune your user stories, right, those changes need to cascade out to your ERDs. Right? And you need to make a conscious like decision and a conscious like mental note of doing that stuff. So these these entity relationship diagrams, you can make them by hand. You can make them on a whiteboard, or you can use something like there's a website called draw.io. All sorts of like sketch.io or whatever, where you can go and draw these things out, and they'll have tools, little arrows and stuff. So your tables are going to be nouns, and you pull the nouns from your user stories. I look at this thing. This was the user story from before that we were looking at. And I'm able to see words like, as a user, I want to save a story. Saved stories. I have these things that are nouns that need to exist somewhere, right? So I can turn them into part of my ERD. Apparently I need users, I need stories, and I need something that joins users and the stories that they've saved. Right? Okay. Let's see. I think what we're going to do is we're going to take like a 10-minute break in a second, and then when we dive back, we can just get back, we can just dive right into tech choices and hammer this part out. Right? Because the tech choices is going to be, it's going to be a fun time. Okay. Now, are there any questions at the moment? Cool. I don't want you to I don't want you to start coding anytime soon, right? Honestly, today, my opinion, hot take, should be mostly planning. Maybe you can start coding tomorrow. That's cool, right? But it's Wednesday. Plan a whole bunch. Okay, so like all the stuff that we've done right now, like in the presentation here, that's stuff that should take you like an entire day, maybe a day and a half to actually do. Okay? And it's an ongoing process as well. Cool. So if there's no questions, we'll take a 10-minute break, and at 10:02, we're going to pick back up again. It's the Thursday afternoon, Monday morning podcast. That's what it is. Yeah. Yeah, we'll just give it another minute. Whew. All right, welcome back. What we're going to talk about right now is tech choices. Starting off with deployment, you're still not ready to code, right? Deployment. How are we going to kind of host our web application? There are several choices, and it's probably worth talking about it or like thinking about it a little bit at the beginning before you get started on actually coding, because it will inform the choices that you have to make going forward. So here are some options. 2 options, precisely. Just 2. In the real world, there's many, but for practical purposes, like these are the things that we're going to do. You're going to do a final project, right? And when you do your final project, like you can flex this stuff a bit more. Before right now, the tried and true tested ways of doing this are localhost. You just host on localhost. That stuff works totally fine. Right? In fact, you already saw this when Sadie did her lecture on CRUD. When you host something on localhost, you can also give people the address to it, and then they can do stuff on it, right? So if you want to make an application that needs multiple people using the same website at the same time, you can still do localhost, right? Just like how Sadie did, and it works. Right? So localhost is totally fine. If you want to just experiment a little bit, you can deploy to a website called Heroku. Heroku is a hosting service. It's not super hard to deploy, but like people tend to have like a little bit of a finicky time with it. So I wouldn't bet on it, right? If you want to play around with Heroku, just get it out early, right? Budget max 1 hour or something, right? Like just give yourself a budget. This is how long I'm willing to spend on playing around with Heroku right now. Either I succeed or I fail. It doesn't matter, right? These are 2 options. My recommendation, to be completely honest, just do it on localhost, right? Just do it on localhost, and then for your final project, you can explore Heroku a bit more or whatever. Or if you have some time before your presentation, like before demos, for fun, on the side, see if you can put it up on Heroku, right? But don't bet on it. Cool. Cool. Server frameworks. So we have some choices in deciding what you're going to use as your backend. Very exciting. You're still not ready to code. Here are your choices. Node.js with Express. Those are your choices. So you have one choice. Right? Node.js with Express. That's what you're going to build it in. Obviously, in the future, like you can play around with other things, but for your midterm project, this is what we require you to use. Right? Final project, you'll see people use all sorts of stuff. Some people do Express. Some people do Rails. Some people do, like whatever, WebSocket stuff, all sorts of stuff. Right now, this is it. Right? In the notes I'm looking at here, they call this like golden handcuffs, I guess. Like you're just tied to this. You're going to be using Express.js. Do not forget about NPM. You can do so many cool things with NPM, right? Look for useful packages, right? Bring stuff in, leverage other people's work. Don't plagiarize, don't cheat, but like you can use NPM packages to do cool things. Right? So maybe do a little bit of like shopping around to see what you can find on there. Okay, now I want to talk about routes. I want to talk about routes a little bit. So your application, right? Your application is gonna be built most likely with like a bunch of jQuery on the front end, right? Asking for a bunch of data and whatever. Right? You're gonna need routes on the back end that will receive things like get/dogs, post/dogs, just gets and posts and whatever. Okay? You need to define what those routes are going to be ahead of time before you even write any code. Notice, still not ready to code. Do not write a single line of code yet. Okay? You need to sit down and actually plan out your routes and be like, okay, am I going to have get and post routes? Am I going to need put and patch routes? Am I going to need delete routes? Okay. What are the nouns and things that I'm talking about? What are the parameters that should be in the URLs? What are the ways that I can make my routes match the RESTful conventions? Right? How comfortable are you with REST right now? Not very? Okay, we're going to do a quick breakout on REST right here. Because I think this stuff is like supremely important for giving yourself a good kickoff. So here is REST in a nutshell. REST in a nutshell. So the letters REST, right, stand for representational state transfer. But that doesn't matter. If you Google REST, you're going to find like a bunch of really kind of nuts articles and videos and stuff. I'm here to tell you that REST does not have to be as complicated as the tutorials make it seem. RESTful routing, right, is all about the names and the verbs that you choose for the routes that you're picking, right? Now, say that I wanted to make a route, so not RESTful, I want to make a non-RESTful route to get all of the dogs, right? What somebody might do is say, oh, easy, that's get / all dogs. Easy, get / all dogs. And then somebody else goes, no, that should be get the dogs. And then we get into a fist fight and the strongest person wins, and then we choose that one, right? That would be a non-RESTful way of coming up with route names. How do I get a single dog? Maybe I would do get a dog. And then maybe the dog ID. What's that? Oh, it's really strong. Yeah. And it's like 3rd grade level. Like this is I don't know if you can spell, it's like the whiskey of markers. Just So here I'm coming up with all these routes that might serve a purpose, right? I might tell myself as part of the user story is I need to be able to see all of the dogs and I need to be able to see a dog, right? But I've come up with like a patchy way of coming up with what these routes should be. What REST says is it says 2 things. To come up with the routes, right? To come up with the routes, you go, what is the resource? What is the resource? And what am I doing to it? Right, what is the resource and what am I doing to it? And these 2 questions here are all you need to figure out your RESTful routing naming. And we're going to see what that looks like in a second. So with our applications, right, we're dealing with this data. I need to be able to do the CRUD actions, right, on particular bits of data. Right, so I'm going to start off by saying what the resource is and then what CRUD action I'm doing on that thing. The resource might be dogs. Right? It might be all of the dogs. In RESTful routing, right, it's going to be lowercase, plural. Lowercase plural. This here is pointing to all of the dogs. This here is pointing to a particular dog, right? So if my resource was all of the dogs, if my resource is one particular existing dog, this right here, right? Dogs /ID, right? ID being the number 2 or 4 or maybe a name or something. You can come up with what that means for yourself. Right? I would pick a number. Right? And then if I have some nested resource, such as maybe all of the owners, one of the owners, all of the dogs for a particular owner. Right? I'm going to leave this up here. Right? This is how we identify a resource. Right? Either a single resource or a collection of many resources. Right? And that's how we go, what is the resource? Right? So if as part of my user stories, and we're going to see this in a second, it says, I need to be able to see all of the dogs, I need something that looks like this. Or maybe if it says I need to be able to see all the dogs for a user, something like this. And the next part of the question is, what am I doing to it? Am I creating a new dog? If I'm creating a new dog, that's going to be a post. Right? Post from the HTTP verbs. Post. This says I'm creating a new resource inside the dogs collection. Right? And then I have to give it data. Right? If I want to get all of the dogs, right? Here's me getting all of the dogs, right? Say I want to add a new dog to an owner. Here's how I get all of the dogs for the owners. And here's how I make a new dog for that owner, right? I want to delete a dog. I would never do that. Right? But I might do it over here, right? Here's how I get a particular dog, right? So those two things. If you go look up on like tutorials and whatever, they'll make it so much more complicated than this, but this is REST, right? It's just a convention for coming up with the combination of verb and path, right? That does what you intend it to do. And if you all follow this convention, right, then it's going to be fairly simple for you to look at like a resource that somebody's made and understand what it does without even having to go read about it. Right? And also, it's going to make it fairly easy for you to come up with new routes that need to be made. Right? REST, in a nutshell. GTP verbs. Okay, so does anyone have any questions about this? Does this clear anything up? Like confusions about REST, or did everybody know this already? Right. Okay. So your RESTful routes, right? Your RESTful routes are going to be made up of the fact that the tables are your nouns. The tables from your ERD, those are the nouns, right? And the routes are going to talk about the verbs that you can do to nouns, right? I want to see all of the dogs, or I want to create a new owner, or I want to make a new order of Nima's fruit cups, right? So again, you're going to have to come up to your user stories again and look at how your routes are actually correlating with their, right? And if there's some mismatch, then you're going to have to negotiate that and figure out, do I need to beef up my user stories some more, right? Or am I adding routes that don't need to be there? Okay. Our next step is to wireframe, right? Wireframing, again, happens before we write any code. And what wireframing is about is it's about describing the layout of your application, defining the hierarchy of the data that you are presenting, and demonstrating how a user can interact with the application, right? So this here is an example of a wireframe. We're going to dive into it a little bit. White on light purple is not a great color, right? So your wireframes are going to be built up from your user stories, from your routes, from all of the stuff that we've done so far, your ERDs, right? With the purpose of showing a rudimentary view of what your application is actually going to look like on a user's screen, right? And what a user will be able to do with the application, right? This is a horrible, horrible wireframe, right? This is a real wireframe, really. There's a long story here about how somebody who hired a student like a long time ago, gave them this wireframe for the application that the student was supposed to build, and the student it's like, I don't know what the hell I'm building, because this is the wireframe they were given, right? Like, what does image mean? Title goes here. Notifications. What kind of notifications? Should they be clickable? Right? Are they listed out like as a banner? Like, what are there? Just many of? Right? Your wireframes should have more information encoded in there. Like, oh yeah, image. Fair enough. All right. There's some image there. Okay, totally cool. Title goes there. What the heck? What the actual heck? Anytime on your wireframes you make a box and you go thing here, right? Here be dragons. You're like offloading that work to someone else. No, you gotta figure out what that's gonna be. This on the other side, this is a horrible wireframe. There's too much. It's so noisy, just screaming at me. This is way too much stuff on a page. There's too much stuff going on. And if I'm a user and I look at this, like, I don't know where to put my eyes. I don't even know how to use this application. What do button mean? What does button mean? Okay. You should make your wireframes be like a crisp, clear view into some part of your application, right? Giving the user access to some data and maybe doing one or two things, right? But it should be self-explanatory, right? Looking at the thing should be an almost like there should be an almost direct correlation between your user stories, like the things that you can do in your user stories, and what you can do in a particular screen of your wireframe. Right? Don't make the stuff too complicated, right? Just go like nice and easy peasy and work your way up towards doing something that I'm going to call storyboarding. Right? Storyboarding is going to mean taking your nice little wireframe. So for example, like use this here as a nice example of a wireframe. This being a profile, has some information about a profile, and maybe some extra little links or whatever. But really all the necessary stuff is here. Once you've come up with a bunch of little wireframes, see if you can stitch them together to build up a story. Right? Meaning you take your user stories, right, and you look at how somebody might navigate through the wireframes to enact one of the things that they want to do, right? Such as maybe a user should be able to add a friend, right? You go through your wireframes and you say, okay, like what would a user have to look at in order to do that? What do they click on, right? Storyboarding is a term used in film and animation. The art of telling a story in a chronological format with pictures showing off the little scenes. So something like this, a storyboarding comic, for a movie or something, you're going to do the same thing loosely. Just take some wireframes and stitch them together. You don't need to come up with anything new. If you're not able to take your wireframes and stitch them together in a storyboard, right, to enact the user stories that you want, alarm bells go off, and you're like, hey, maybe I need to work on my wireframes a little bit more. Right? Maybe there's a missing a hole somewhere. Not a missing hole. Maybe there is a hole that misses some functionality somewhere. Okay. Wireframing for the web is going to be the same as wireframing for a comic book or a movie. Again, you're coming up with a user personality, a story of what they might do, and making a way through like a nice happy path. We get our happy paths from the user stories that you came up with before. Have I made a clear case for why user stories are the most important part of your application? Right? They're the canonical place where you've stored information about what your application's supposed to do. Right? And you should be able to hand that off to anybody, and they should be able to build your application like to a T. Maybe not visually, but they should be able to build it so that it targets everything that you want your application to do. Okay. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about design in a sec. Are there any questions? Cool. Okay, so design. I'm not a designer. I didn't make this slide, but I think they tried to make it like designy, like all rule of thirds and cream of broccoli, whatever color. Like design matters, and then, however, your developers, right? Maybe some of you have backgrounds in design. That's cool, right? Good for you. No, actually, if you have a background in design, like flex it. That's awesome. But like, you're developers, right? That's what this bootcamp's about. You know, you can totally just steal things, steal design from people. Don't spend too much work into trying to make the thing pretty. You know, you can use websites like Dribble, Folio Focus, Smashing. Tom, I'm sure you'd know other websites like Behance. Cool. So go to Tom and ask for design stuff. Or other, I don't know who else has design backgrounds. So just swarming people. Go use resources other people have put together. You know, every website ever looks like this. All of the like new startups or whatever, we're unique. We always have 3 columns, right? You know, this is there's a reason for why people do this. It works, right? Just copy somebody else's design and just move on with your life. People find design impressive, right? It is important to make things look nice, but we're focusing on functionality. Here's this slide with a little story. A wise man once said, "Doing development without design is like doing origami blindfolded. Yes, you will get folded paper, but it will not be a pretty crane." So, very, very wise man. Very wise. Charming, very clever man. So, when you need to make your stuff look pretty, first of all, yes, go get design inspiration from other websites, and also straight up use a UI framework, right? Use things like grids, right? So have you played around with Bootstrap so far? No? Right? A little bit? Maybe take a bit more of a look at Bootstrap, right? Bootstrap gives you this grid system that makes aligning things and positioning things nice and simple, right? If you're having trouble with Bootstrap, come grab us and we'll show you how to use it better, right? Make this an opportunity to kind of dive into those tools a bit more, right? Grids make building things easier, placing content easily on the page. There's many UI frameworks that let you do this stuff, right? Having grids and having nicely styled buttons and stuff. It's hard to figure out which one to choose. Here's one. Skeleton. Here's another one. Black hole. Pure CSS. There is Foundation. There's so many of these. Like, all of these. Bootstrap's up there. Just use Bootstrap, dude. Like, just use Bootstrap. Bootstrap gives you nice buttons, gives you grids, gives you nice drop downs, little modals, right? Everything you need to make a website look nice, right? And then you can style on top of that. You know, give it nice colors or change the borders or whatever. Like, do whatever you want. But start by using a UI framework. Okay. Bootstrap. Okay. Again, which one should I use? Generally, like Bootstrap or Foundation are the places where I would start. With your final project, maybe like you can take some more time diving into this stuff, right? and picking a different framework. But right now, I would 100% recommend start with Bootstrap and work on top of that. It'll give you a great starting point. Right? Bootstrap also helps you start off with like nice typography stuff and styling your forms and whatever. You can spend some time picking nice fonts and all that. There's also like color palette pickers and things like that that you can use to make your things look pretty. Okay. Git is a big chunk of pain that you're going to feel over the next couple days. How do you like Git so far? Can I get thumbs up for Git? Can I get thumbs downs for Git? Oh, I have good news for y'all. Yeah, those thumbs downs are gonna turn into thumbs mediums pretty soon. No, I think you'll have a good time if you follow some good standards and guidelines and communicate with each other in your team. So we talked about Git way back on day 1. Nate, way back. Here is a good recipe for good Git practices. Clone the project, right? So everybody, like, you have one person make the project, right? One person make the project. We'll add collaborators, and I'll give you more information about this stuff in a minute. Okay, but here's good Git practice: clone, branch, code. Right? So branch, you've worked with branches so far, making a branch for fixing a bug, making a branch for implementing a feature. Right? Then, when you're ready, you can check out to your master branch locally, right? Pull from master to make sure that stuff is up to date, right? Your master is the same as the remote master. Then you can merge your stuff in from inside, right? So merging is going to mean taking the code that you have locally, right? And that should be pushed, by the way. Your branch that you're working on, right? You should push that because it'll take you like a couple hours to work on a branch, right? It might take you a day or two. Right? Merge, and then you can push. You can push, then you can continue working again from step 2. Right? Now, the little asterisks are going to mean test your code at that point. So while I'm coding, I should be testing my stuff. Right? Before I check out to master, I should test that the thing that I coded, right, actually does what I intended it to do. Right? I'm not going to need you to like actually write tests, but make a little suite for yourself to figure out how you're going to test the functionality of your product. Right? Where do you think you could maybe get like a script for the behavior of your application? It's a nice codified place that tells you as a user you should be able to do certain things. Use your user stories for testing out your application. Okay. So clone, branch, code. Code is going to mean also just push your branch, just like you've done with TinyApp and with Tweeter. Check out, pull, merge, push. Are there questions about that so far? Okay. I want you to take some time to like mess around with that a little bit. Okay. As a group, get into a good flow. And if you're having trouble with it, grab me or grab one of the mentors, right? And we'll sit down and run through the Git workflow together so that you're comfortable with it. Okay. If you get a good Git workflow, right, each of you can work on different parts of the thing and you won't run into, hopefully, fingers crossed, won't run into merge conflicts, which are when your two code bases are out of sync and you try merging them and it causes errors. Right? But if you follow this recipe, you should be okay. Should be. Should, yeah, keyword. Right. So please, do not code on master. Don't code on master. Make a branch. Right? Make a branch where you do your code. And once you're happy with the code, then you bring it into master. But you should never code directly on master. Right? Absolutely never. Okay. We're getting really close to being able to code now. Scaffolding out our project. Right? Figuring out how we're actually going to do the work of coding. Scaffolding is going to mean, for me, setting up everything that you need at that last step to get started. Right? Making sure that everybody's got the system set up properly, everybody's understood what they're going to be working on, everybody's got the tools installed that they'll need, right? Everybody's got the system cloned. That's the scaffolding. I recommend that scaffolding be done as a team. Right? Pair program. Pick somebody's computer, you sit down, and what you do is this. Here's your, oh my god, that's so not visible. Here's your checklist. I need to stand on this side to see it. So first of all, set up your GitHub repository. Also, you get these slides. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to send them to you. Set up your GitHub repository. Right? So one person goes, makes a GitHub repo, right? And adds everybody else as a collaborator. Right? Do you know what I mean when I say add collaborators? Cool, right? So add collaborators. Did it yesterday, perfect, right? Install. The thing is, because you might trash your project and just start again from scratch. So download and install all the resources on that one computer. Okay? Use any of the CDN links where possible. So this is using like the boilerplate, scaffolded out. Get that set up just so that it loads. Make sure that your app just loads. Right? It just need just get the hello world to work. Doesn't need to do anything. Right? Hello world, all these things are installed. Great. Push it to GitHub. Right? Push it to GitHub. Bless you. So that everybody else can clone. Right? So here everybody's been on one computer, right? Just gather around one person, get it to work. Everybody clones. Make sure that everybody is able to get it to run and do the hello world. And then you're good, right? Knowing that everybody has set up the project properly. Then you can move on to deciding team responsibilities. But this here should be done as a group. Dividing your tasks is, I think, actually a lot of fun. Figuring out who should be working on what. There's many different options that you can pick. Here are some different things that you can do. Sometimes people like dividing tasks by like, oh, I'll do front end and you do back end, right? Or, oh, I'll do the migrations, any migration stuff, like I'll do that. Or, oh, I will do all the responsive stuff, right? Sometimes people like splitting up tasks like that. The way that I personally like having you do the tasks is either pair up on things, especially if you're in a group of two, like just the two of you can work together on a lot of the stuff, or split up into features. So you've come up with your user stories that define the features that your application has. You can take those features, make a list, like put them in a list and go, okay, which one needs to happen first? Like which thing needs to be implemented first? Right? And once you figured out that list, right, that list of priorities and how they kind of ripple into each other, then your team can pick features that are like independent, right, and implement those things front end to back end, right? One person can do front end to back end for each of those features, right? So that you, as a person on your team, get exposure to the full stack of your application, right? What can happen if people do this, the I do front end, you do back end thing, is that at the end of it, you get somebody who knows a lot about the front end and nothing about the back end, right? And that can be really frustrating for people. They're like, oh no, but like now when I'm talking to people about the project, I don't even know what my project was working like on the back end, right? So try to at least split up a little bit in features, and wherever you can, pair up with each other on stuff. So if you feel like you're spending a lot of time on one particular thing, and your teammate is doing something really interesting that you want to learn more about, okay, just be like, hey, I would like to, like, can I pair up with you on that particular thing? I just want to learn more about it, right? Or maybe like, can I shadow you on that, right? You should, as a group, feel comfortable with like facilitating that and giving each other the opportunity to hop in on really every part of your project, right? I want you to have your fingers in all of the cakes or whatever, right? Like, it's an idiom, right? No, right? Just make sure you get enough time. It's your project, right? It's your project, and at the end of the day, I want you to feel comfortable talking about it to people. Okay. Now you're ready to code. You're ready to start hopping in, actually writing a bit of code. Woo! What? Oh my God! Did Nima go through 59? 59 slides? What? 59 out of 67 slides to tell you that you're ready to start coding. So coding is like the last bit. It's the least important bit to me. Least important. Yeah, this is a coding boot camp. Whatever. It's you look surprised. It's coding is not that important. Like the planning is the most important part of these projects. When you're ready, then you can dive into the stuff. Here's some quick tips for scaffolding out your front end. Just hot tips. You don't have to have your front end and your back end connected immediately. Okay? You can start off by just making like front end pages, right? That just have information that's hard coded. You can start off with static pages. Okay? Hard code some data, play around with the CSS if you want to do some of that. Right? I find CSS like a good way to kind of relax, so I like doing this stuff. Then you can decide on ID and class naming. Just do that as a team so that your CSS doesn't get too complicated. Right? Maybe your team just goes, we don't want to use IDs, we're just doing classes or something. Right? Just pick something. Use placeholders for your front end. Like Phil Murray gives you a picture of Bill Murray. There's Place Kitten I really like. Ipsum generators for like text. So there's Bacon Ipsum, Hipster Ipsum. There's just many of these Ipsums. I found out recently about this here. There's a website called Kanye Rest. Yeah. Shout out to Steve. Steve sent me in case he watches the video. Steve sent me this yesterday. It's a free JSON API for random Kanye West quotes. Kanye.rest. So if you make a GET request to Kanye.rest, you'll get. No, Steve sent this to me. Yeah. Perhaps I should have been more like water today, or whatever, right? Like there's, just use these like placeholder things, right? There's tons of great stuff in here. Where else do we go? Oof. Okay, so, boop. And try out your layouts with like different amounts of data. So little quotes, lots of text, maybe text that like one word that's really long or whatever, to make sure that your CSS isn't all like broken and stuff when that happens. Right. Tips for scaffolding out your backend. Again, your backend doesn't need to be connected to your front end immediately. You can start out on the backend just kind of like making sure that it works just from your REPL, right? Or just using curl or Postman, right? I know, I think Travis showed you Postman, correct? Right? Play around with Postman quite a bit. Postman is amazing because you can save requests and make like a folder of test requests that you can just test out. So you don't have to write out the thing every time. Okay? If you want like a quick tour of Postman, grab a mentor or grab me or someone, like whoever's free, and they'll show you how to use Postman because it's extremely beneficial. Right? Start off by understanding what your data objects are going to look like, right? So you can hard code some of that information. And also remember to code atomically, meaning code bit by bit. Very little amount of code, then test. Then very little amount of code, then test, right? Use helper methods. There should be tons of helper methods. We talked about helper methods with the Connect stuff yesterday, right? Take a look at the notes that I sent out. Right? If that stuff doesn't make a ton of sense, come grab me, right? And we'll take a look at it together. Right? But use helper methods, refactor, and modularize. Right? This here, like the coding atomically is particularly important when you're working on a team, right? Because you're going to be working with git commits. And if you code atomically, you can make lots of little changes, ensure that it works, and then commit. Right? Little change, ensure that it works, and commit. Right? Make this a race to see who can have the most commits. Right? Imagine that you're being paid by the commit. Right? The more commits you have, the more I like you. No, the more commits you have, the better of a time you're gonna have when you run into issues. Right? Because first of all, if you mess up your code base, right? If the last time you committed was 20 minutes ago, that's okay. But if the last time you committed it was like an hour ago, right, or 2 days ago, then you're in for a rude awakening. Okay? The other thing is, say you have a commit that introduced a bug. Okay? If you have lots of little commits, we can help you find the one commit that changed 3 lines of code that introduced that bug. Okay? Whereas if your commits were like 50 lines long, like just 50 lines of code changing across 7 files, I'm going to have trouble figuring out what's wrong with your code. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Just commit a lot. Communication is important. You're working on a team. How many people have worked on a team project before? Just in your life? Yeah, through like school or actual work stuff. How many people love working in teams? Okay, 2 people. That should say something. 3 people. All right. Yeah. Who here has like traumatic team experiences? Because I know I do. Yeah, there we go. Right? So let's not make this a traumatic team experience. Communicate with each other. Look at all the tools you can use to communicate. Slack, Telegram, WhatsApp, Google Meet, Google Hangouts, Skype, use something. Carrier, like pigeons or whatever, like little messenger pigeons. Do something. There's many tools, just pick one. Here you go, a little Morse code. Just beep, 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 beep. Just let each other know what the heck you're doing, mate, so that somebody doesn't start working on something that clashes with something that somebody else is working on. Don't just make decisions on your own, right? That's why I'm telling you to document everything, right? So that things get written down together. And if somebody starts coding up something and it's not part of the project, like it just doesn't fit the features, you can be like, hey, you in the blue, that's not one of our user stories. Don't waste time on that, right? Communication is so important, right? Well, flags, right? Some way of letting each other know what's happening. Are you gonna be sick? Do you have a haircut appointment, right? Let each other know. I know this sounds like patronizing or whatever, but do it. It's hard because when you really dive into coding, you can forget you're working on a team and people just silo themselves off, and it's so important that you don't do that. Okay? It's so important that you communicate with each other about how things are working, how are you feeling, right? Do I really want to be working on this feature, right? Do I maybe think that this thing isn't core functionality anymore? My favorite thing that I've seen a team do so far is for final projects. Months ago, they sat at over here, but you do it anywhere. They were I don't know if we're actually allowed to do this, but they were drawing on the window with a markers, washable markers. And what they did was they kept a mood tracker over the course of the day. Right? So every half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever, they set a timer. Somebody would get up and be like, all right, team, how we feeling? What's our morale at? And they would track the morale, right? And if the morale dipped a little bit, they'd all go out for a walk or get some snacks or something. But just keeping in touch with everyone, right? Making sure that you're all happy, you're all doing well. Right? Last but not least, for keeping track of the things that you're working on, Trello is particularly useful. Right? I don't know if you've used Trello before. If one of your team members has, give each other a quick introduction to how to use Trello, right? To keep track of the features that you're working on, maybe making a list of the ones that need to be worked on, the ones that are being worked on, and the ones that are complete. Right? You can use Trello. I've seen people use Post-it notes. That works as well, right? But just some way of keeping yourselves accountable and giving yourself a glimpse, or not a glimpse, a high-level view of what you're actually doing, right? And that brings me to the end of this presentation. There's that whole, thank you for listening and whatever. Good luck. It's gonna be a good time. I'm very excited for you. Are y'all excited? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Can I get a go team? Yay. Oh, no way. All right. Awesome. So you got a go team. And basically, yeah, I'm gonna let you go. Remember, go through these slides together as a team if you really want to, right? Figure out what the scaffolding, what your planning is going to be. Do not start coding until you've done all the other steps before. If you think that you're ready to start coding, flag a mentor down, right? Or flag me down, show us what you've done for your planning, and then we can give you the go-ahead. Does that sound good? Perfect. All right. I will see you, well, not again later today. I think I'm mentoring a little bit, but I'll see you. If you need me, just come grab me or message me. Sweet. No questions? Beautiful. All right. Have a great rest of your day.